Okay, everyone, we are on episode 22 of the Conquer the Mind podcast. I am very excited for today's guest with Dan Claps, someone that I've been really looking forward to having on the podcast for a while now. So now that the podcast, I've built up some confidence with some guests at this point, and I'm really hoping to really dive into the mindset, the insights, the experiences of really a serial entrepreneur. So Dan, I really appreciate you taking the time to join the Conquer the Mind podcast and share your insights, your experiences. I'm very excited.
Yeah, thank you again for having me, Josh. I'm excited to talk about all things franchising and Voda Cleaning and Restoration.
Awesome. So the episode's kind of changed for everyone kind of listening, but for today's episode, I think it's going to be really action-packed with really action items for anyone either lost, trying to figure out what they're looking to do in life, maybe in corporate America, trying to figure out what they're trying to do in life. So for anyone that doesn't know who Dan Claps is, first off, just look him up online. You'll find countless videos going over his background, who he is. He's been on numerous podcasts going over his background, his insights. So not going to bore everyone, although it's definitely not boring kind of going through your background, your insights. That is already out there on the internet. So for anyone that doesn't know, just a brief synopsis. So Dan started in franchising from the age of 22 in the year 2014. So similar to me, kind of starting in the franchising world at an early age. He started at the Murphy business at a financial corporation. He's actually the youngest franchise broker as part of the system, very similar to me as well. So I'm very excited to dive into that. In 2016, Dan went on to co-found basically a lead generation tool for franchise brokers, for franchise consultants. And if you're not in this world, you know, your business relies off lead generation. So Dan studied the industry. He found what needed to be done, created a lead generation business, sold a lead generation business, started a new business, helping franchisors find leads, you know, successfully exited that business as well. And now he's on today's mission where he is the CEO of Voda Restoration, founded, you know, the franchise Playbook, really an incubator of franchise brands. So we're going to dive into that today. So Dan, starting off, you know, when you're at an early age, you know, you've just going through that, you've accomplished a ton. You're really a serial entrepreneur. How does someone know if they're meant for the entrepreneurial world? I understand when you were in college, you had a staffing and recruiting business, and you were kind of learning that it wasn't necessarily an asset, but more just kind of like a job that you were working on. Was there like a point during that when you realized you were an entrepreneur? You weren't necessarily made for the 9 to 5. You never really went, you know, the corporate route for very long. How did you know you were made to kind of be a business owner? You know, for a lot of people thinking about franchising, they're not sure if they're made to be an entrepreneur, kind of similar mindsets. I'd be curious, what was going through your mindset? How did you know you were an entrepreneur, Dan?
Yeah, sure. Well, I appreciate you sharing my background so I don't have to. In my role, I have to share my background quite often. So thank you for doing it for me. You did a better job too.
Hey, if I messed up, feel free to correct me.
No,
I missed a
great.
lot.
I thought you came prepared. There was two questions there. So how does someone know if they're an entrepreneur, and when did I know I was an entrepreneur? So I'll start with when I think someone knows that they're an entrepreneur or at the mindset of wanting to become an entrepreneur. And really, I think it centers around two things. Number one is if you find yourself on nights, weekends, evenings, thinking about doing more, you're not content with just playing around at tennis and going back and watching, you know, fantasy football or playing fantasy football or watching a movie. You want to do more, and you find yourself, you know, maybe even working beyond the 9 to 5 hours for your job, and you're treating it like your own business because you want to excel. You have a desire to control your own destiny. Those are good areas to think about, because the reality is if you want to be an entrepreneur, at least for the short term, but probably forever, you have to be thinking about your work, not just from the hours that you are working. One of my favorite sayings that, you know, friends of mine that have 9 to 5 jobs, they work 9 to 5, and then they own the time that they're free from 5 to 9 a.m. the next day. As an entrepreneur, you own all of your time, but that means that you're available at all times, at least in the beginning. And so you have to be okay with moving away from normal hours, which this day and age, it seems like even a regular corporate job as an executive, you have to be available all the time anyway. So that's number one. Number two, I think you have to think about, and by the way, there's all kinds of different entrepreneurs. There's also intrapreneurs. And so I don't consider someone having to the definition of an entrepreneur is someone that utilizes limited resources to gain maximum output. That's the true definition if you look into what it means. And an intrapreneur is someone that can be, entrepreneurial within an organization. You don't necessarily have to be using your own capital to be an entrepreneur. I see many members of my team as true entrepreneurs working within our platform. And so an intrapreneur is someone utilizing other people's capital to build maximum output with limited resources. And so you don't necessarily have to jump into something yourself to truly be an entrepreneur. So those are things to think about. And so in my opinion, if you're going above and beyond your job in an organization, that's number one. Number two, if you have the ability to influence people and sell in any way, I think that you're crazy not to start your own business, because that's 2/3 of the battle is selling.
No, that's really powerful. And yeah, I think that's a really great lesson. That was me as well. When I was in corporate America, I felt like every day I was out working the CEO, the founder, I was working weekends. I just took a lot of pride in treating it like my own personal business. So I think that's a really great time for anyone thinking about franchising. If you are lost, you feel like you're out working everyone, you feel like you're meant for something greater, why not at least explore those different avenues? So I think that's really interesting, Dan. And kind of going back, you're 22, you're a franchise broker. For a lot of people, you either have family in franchising or you kind of fall into franchising. I'm kind of curious, as someone at a young age getting involved in franchising, what was like the perspective? What were you kind of seeing in franchising? You're dealing with a lot of people, 40s, 50s, 60s, potentially making life-changing decisions. Was there something you're kind of like seeing at an early age that you're like, I'm seeing some issues here, there's some problems here? What was kind of your overall initial impersonation of franchising when you got started?
Yeah, I mean, when you had asked me when I knew I would be an entrepreneur, and I knew that at a very young age. And one of the things that I will tell you is that if you are, listening to this podcast in whatever stage of life you're in, know that whatever you're thinking will be easier, it will not. Whether if you're 30 and you're thinking, oh, when I'm 40, it'll be easier, it will be harder. When you're 45, it's harder. Because the reality is when we work, like I work my tail off, but I don't want to do the same level of work I did when I was in my 20s. And I won't want to do what I'm doing in my 30s. And typically you kind of naturally people kind of move in that direction toward, retirement. Time gets smaller. You want to spend more time living, not working.
Yeah.
And so one of the best pieces of advice I have ever gotten is that working and managing time is a muscle. And so, I remember I used to have a mentor. I used to think, how the heck do you balance all this and have a family and do all these things? And I put that on a pedestal, but I realized it was not that that person was any better than me. They had more time working the muscle. They had also started a business young. And so all those years of working, there's this saying, owning a business is like working like dog years. So if you own a business and you work for a year, you worked for 7 years in corporate. I'm probably 45 in the business work time frame. And so, the sooner you start, the better. And, thinking about like for you, like, you don't have the same life pressures that I have. And I don't have the same life pressure someone at 35 or 40 has. And so the sooner you can start, the better. When I got in franchising, that's what I saw. I saw, wait a minute, I don't even understand this is even a question. If I could do this for 10 years, I'll be 32 and been in that for 10 years. And that was kind of the mindset around what I saw in franchising. Start sooner, not later.
Huh, that's fascinating. Yeah, that's so funny. That's very similar to any advice I give as well. When you're in college, you're in high school, college, you feel like, you have so many different problems. Then you get to the real world and then, your eyes open a lot more. And, then you'll have family, kids, life does not get easier. You just get more and more problems. More money, more problems is kind of the saying. So I think that's really powerful. And, just kind of, you're 22, you're a franchise broker. Where they're like, what were you kind of like seeing in the industry? You're dealing with a lot of people in franchising, probably been there, 10, 20, 30 years. What were like your initial impersonations of the, things you could do a little bit better? A lot of people rely on the same kind of ways to generate leads. And, you're kind of evaluating the industry for 2 years. You start your own lead generation business. What were like the initial like problems that you were seeing in the industry?
Yeah. Well, like, in getting into that business, so this idea of starting sooner than later, the best time to plant an oak tree was yesterday, right? The next best time is today, right? It's always better to just start before you're ready. It's funny. I think about this in my personal life. I know I want to have kids, and I keep doing the same thing. I want to have kids like people want to own a business. I keep going, I know it's going to be great, but I'm going to push it off. The
Yeah.
best time is just to do it. There's never a good time for anything. But
Mm,
as far as like seeing, the lead gen company, what had happened was I started out. I was a business and franchise broker and consultant. I was
mm,
part of a network. The founder of that network reached out to me asking if I wanted to help sell a CRM system that they had built. And at the first call, I had said no. I'm very focused on my current business. But
mm,
at that time, I looked up to that person and I realized there was an opportunity to learn. If I could sell and bring some money, and I could get some time to kind of be mentored. And so I said, you know what? As long as
yeah.
it's not a job, I can't work for anybody. If you pay me a flat rate to sell, and I can keep focusing on my business, I'll do it. And
Mm,
so we ended up working together, and I started selling that CRM. And my approach to selling it was very much the same approach I take now, which was reaching out to franchise consultants and finding just about their business, what problems they had. I just like to listen.
mm,
And so I would ask about their business and try to find ways that presenting this CRM would solve those problems. But
yeah.
as I did those calls for multiple months, I made a list and I realized that the biggest problem they had was not the CRM. They didn't have leads. They needed leads. There was no lead source. And so I went to my, that previous business partner at the time. It was not a business partner. And I said, these guys need leads. And turned out that he was thinking about the same kind of business that I had in my head. And he had been doing the research. And so like franchising, I had the opportunity to partner with someone that had the audience.
Yeah.
So I was able to join. I learned how to build a business by following the kind of that process that he had done the research, and I executed on the plan. And I
Mm,
was like the operating partner. And there's a couple of things you want to think about when you get a business partner. Number one, there's three things. There's three times to get a business partner,
mm,
and if you don't check any of these three, then don't get a business partner. Get a mentor. Business partner either brings capital, a
mm,
skill you don't have, or an audience.
mm,
That's it. Capital, a skill you don't have, or an audience. And then so in this case, we shared similar skills, but he had the audience, and we shared the capital. And so went into that partnership with that audience, built that business. And one of the things that is important to know is that that business made sense for two reasons. Number one,
mm,
people had a pain, so brokers needed leads, a
mm,
pain, but it was a pain they knew they had, not a pain that you don't know you have, and I have to convince you of this pain.
yeah.
No, this was a pain they knew they had, and they
Mm,
were actively trying to solve that pain.
yeah.
And then number two was they were ready to buy with credit cards in hands. They were ready to give you the credit card and buy the product. And so,
Mm,
alongside that and the fact that I could sell to people that were my peers because I was a franchise consultant, it made a lot of sense. And
mm,
leveraging my previous background, all of those things were part of the reasons why that business was successful were those ingredients.
mm. That's so powerful. And, it's just like your first business is not always, your last business. I think what you're kind of alluding to, analysis paralysis, people think of all these different reasons to say no rather than kind of dive into an opportunity that does make sense. When, in franchising, you could buy a single unit. That does not mean, that's your end game by any means. You could become a multi-unit owner. You could acquire a portfolio of franchises. There's not necessarily like your first step into franchises really where you end up, but all these different paths that it seems like you took ended up leading to where you are today. So I think that's just really powerful. And going back to the story, I know you and your business partner made a serious investment to start this lead generation business. My understanding is that you actually invested a significant amount of your own money, to a point where it was almost all the money left to your bank account, and the business partner did not necessarily know that you were making this significant investment. So I'm just curious, as someone that's probably very good at evaluating risk and figuring out what is a good opportunity and where to hedge your risk, similar to someone getting involved in franchising, trying to evaluate all these different decisions. What was kind of like part of your decision making process where you felt confident to invest, almost everything to your name to a business idea? What was your thought process? What was the decision making into that?
Yeah, well, for reference, everything is relative, right? So at that time, 22, 23 years old, I was less sophisticated than you. That was probably all my money was not a lot of money, right? But it was, enough to, it was all my money. And yeah, I didn't mention that because I didn't want to not have the opportunity. When opportunity comes, sometimes you have to say yes and just and just figure it out later. And so at that time, for me, it felt like getting into business with, I don't know, it was just a great person to get into business with. And so I took the opportunity and ran with it. And I mean, the truth is, I believed in myself. I mean, the opportunity was there, but I really did believe in myself. And also I don't really fear the loss of money, especially at that time. I didn't really have anything else. What was I going to lose? Remember, the more you have, the more you fear losing. At that time, I didn't have much to fear. And so it made sense to jump in. And that's why I'm saying starting young. Listen, I got a lot of business just being young. People seeing you young and industrious people, typically further along, want to give back. It's funny, Josh, when I was your age, and it's not that much of a difference in age, but when I was your age, I could get mentors differently than I can now. Now, a lot of people see me as competition, quite frankly. They don't help me the same way, which is fine. I'm just in a different stage of my career. And they probably shouldn't, because I am competition. I'm just kidding. But no, I'm just kidding. But so it made sense to get into that business. And the reality was, the thing I knew I could control was I could go out there and make those leads and sell those leads. And selling is something I'm good at. So if you're listening to this podcast and you can sell, you can bootstrap your way through anything if you have the ability to sell. And I'll share one other thing. When we sold that business in 2022, when the opportunity to sell came, I really didn't want to. And the truth is, you could ask my best friend. I sat down in complete distraught that I was thinking I'm not, I guess if you're getting deep, like this idea of not good enough, right? So I had this idea that I'll never be. I felt this way.
Yeah.
You look at Voda success. Okay, only a year and a half ago, whatever it is, 2 years ago, I thought I will never be able to make a business like this. Never as big as this thing. I got lucky. What if I got lucky? What if it was the partner? What if I'm just, along for the ride? What if the timing was good? What if I just can't work as hard? And I truly believe in my own limiting beliefs that I wouldn't be able to build a business as big as that one. And the truth is, I was right. I was right about that. I wasn't able to build a business as big as that. That was nothing to me. That was small in retrospect. The truth is that business was so beneath where my capabilities and potential were that my limiting beliefs almost stopped me from realizing that. And so what I always explain to people when they're trying to buy a business is your limiting beliefs, you're probably right. You're probably right about whatever you're thinking. You're actually wrong in the sense that you can do way more than you think you can.
Huh. That's so fascinating. I think that's really powerful. Just this idea of, you can, have a lot of success and then still really kind of question, where you are at life. And that's a good question in terms of when you have a version of success, we could define success in another podcast. Everyone defines it differently. But, my definition, you had accomplished a lot. You had accomplished a great deal of success at that point. How do you maintain that mindset that, you want to keep getting to that next level? You want to keep leveling up your life. What is your mindset? Is it, are you like scared to lose the wealth, or what is like the why that kind of keeps you driving to that next step in terms of, kind of questioning yourself? You mentioned in terms of trying to figure out, can I do this better? I think everyone has these self-limiting beliefs to a certain extent. And I think it's really powerful that even someone with massive success can still have some of those similar mindsets. And given the name of the podcast with Conquer the Mind, I'd love to figure out what that mindset was that continues to drive someone even after you have achieved success.
Yeah. Well, I think the reality is you'll never achieve the level of success that you can. There's always something you can work on. When it comes to, I do believe mindset's everything when it comes to business. I mean, for me, everyone has a definition of success, like you mentioned, but my definition is changing by the day. I'm realizing that I want to be successful. My drive to be successful in business carries into a desire to be successful in life. And you realize that, the guy that can balance a successful business and family and marriage and relationships, is the true success. I struggle with that right now, managing everything. And so to me, success is being able to do all of it. But, when it comes to the mindset, I mean, business is first of all, business is the ultimate sport. It's 24/7. It never ends. Your competition's always trying to beat you. Mark Cuban says it best. It's the best sport you can play. And business is really the ultimate self-development experience, because the more you become a master of your mind and emotions, the better leader you can be, the more you can remove you
Mm.
know, your ego. And so, I mean, dude,
Yeah.
uh, I have imposter syndrome every day, like that I get to be the leader of this company. And what that does is it drives me to become a better version of myself. And
Mm.
so, you know, I think the reality is, look at business like a video game. You get to multiple checkpoints. When you get to a checkpoint, you can't really go back.
Mm.
You know, so for me, when I sold my last business, unless I took that money and went out and gambled it away on, you know, red in Vegas, I kind of hit a checkpoint that I was a certain level of wealth.
Mm.
And I remember my dad saying, put that in the bank and go work, and you never have to think about retirement again.
Mm.
And for me, I could have stopped there and said, oh, here's my checkpoint. Retirement's covered. Go get a job and I'm good for the retirement.
Yeah.
I decided that there was very little chance that I could go back from where I got to. So if I were to leverage that capital, I'd probably get to the next level, if not at least stay where I was. So it all felt like a very calculated decision.
Huh. That's really fascinating. And I want to dive into very shortly you being in with Voda, transferring from, the broker side to being a Zor. But I just think that's really powerful, the different mindsets to achieve success. And each level, it comes with its own problems, challenges, and you get to the next level. It's hard to look back. You have more responsibilities, probably more people relying on you to a certain extent as well. So yeah, I think that's really powerful. And I like how you define success as well, where it doesn't have to be just business, but balancing family, business, lifestyle, and you personally working on the family matter as well, and something I'm working on as well. So I appreciate you sharing that. So with your career, you made the transition to be a franchisor. Can you help us understand what was like the thought process? Have you always wanted to be on the franchise development side, or what was that transition like?
Yeah, sure. Well, you know, to kind of to summarize where I was going was that, you know, you have these levels in business, and your goal postures get wider as you accomplish your goals. And I remember again, my dad, is as I was looking at what to do, he said, why would you want to gamble with all that money? You know, you earned it, right? And I
Yeah.
remember saying, look, it is a gamble. It's a calculated risk to start a franchisor, but I feel like I'm going to a table of poker and I'm a professional poker player playing against 5-year-olds. That's how I truly felt. Maybe that sounds a bit arrogant, but if you're a
Mm.
professional poker player, I guess there's a chance you could fail against the 5-year-olds playing poker. But the reality is, poker's not a game of luck. It is a game of strategy, right? And
Mm.
so, maybe I don't mean 5-year-olds, but I felt like my competition, and it was
Yeah.
a calculated risk.
Mm.
And so, you know, for me, that meant taking my capital and using it as capital, not as my money. It wasn't my money. I saw it as capital to build what's next. To become a franchisor was just a natural progression. I've been
Mm.
in the space 10 years. I saw things go well, go poorly. I've been at probably 100 franchise conferences. I just, by osmosis, just learned, and friends of mine are franchisors. So it just, when you see friends of yours, you know, building franchise companies, and you know, it's your peer group, you feel like you could do it too.
Mm.
And one of the best decisions I ever did was deciding to become a franchisor with Voda.
That's incredible. And you mentioned kind of the confidence that I want to dive into before we dive into Voda real quick. What, you kind of made the joke, playing poker with 5-year-olds, but, that gives, you have a certain confidence to that. And it probably comes with, putting in the work to get that confidence. How did you like find that confidence that, you could actually be a franchise developer, especially at, still relatively very young age, being on the franchise development side, what kind of gave you the confidence that you were able to do something like that?
Um, I mean, from a natural standpoint, I've always had something where people trust me. I truly do feel like I care about people and love people, and want to connect them. So I knew I had that kind of ability to build trust. Like, I remember as a teenager, like, if I got pulled over, you know, on the side of the road by a police officer, I knew I'd somehow be able to kind of just, they would look at me and I would talk, and I would somehow, that's definitely
Yeah.
one of my skills, is connecting with people. But I mean, the reality for me, man, it's very simple. There's way smarter people than me, and there's way smarter people than me. I'm just more optimistic and work hard. And if you put me on a treadmill, as Will Smith says, if you put me on a treadmill next to you, I'll either stay on there longer or I'll die. Like, that's how I feel. And so the confidence comes from this idea that, like, I won't be outworked,
Mm.
and I can figure out the rest. And I know that the reality is I know how I treat people that work with me. And so I
Mm,
know I can always bring in really smart people that'll account for all my my missing ingredients. And so, the confidence with Voda really, probably came the second Zach Nolte, our COO and co-founder,
mm,
and I decided to work together because I knew our skills completely aligned. They were completely different. Remember, I said you have a partner who either brings capital, a different skill, or an audience.
mm.
Zach brought a completely different skill, and our kind of Achilles heels were the opposite, and so we work really well together. That's what gave me the confidence.
No, that's awesome. And just the power of, in franchising, when I'm dealing with candidates, helping them evaluate franchisors just as much as you're evaluating them. And, those are some of the things they're evaluating, the franchise development experience. And it's really cool that you brought in such, talented individuals to help, fill out those different skills that, you can rely on your strengths, they can rely on their strengths as well, and kind of builds the best of both worlds. So diving into, Voda, the franchise playbook, can you dive us into how the franchise playbook was created? What was the thought making process? What was like the particular draw to home services for someone like yourself? You've been in the industry for a decade. You're kind of studying all these different franchises. You've awarded, hundreds of franchises, I'm sure at this point. What was the draw where you said, I want to go into home services as well?
Yeah. Well, I've sold indirectly about 1,000 franchises in my career so far. I watched franchisors have exits in the excess of $100 million, and I was involved in a lot of their development. More importantly, I would sell a franchise to someone, and then I would want to work with them ongoing, and I couldn't because what are they going to? I wanted to. I don't. I swear I was put on earth to help people become a business owner, and my mission is to empower entrepreneurs to think bigger. And I want to help people not just buy a business, but get that next truck, hit that revenue milestone. And so being a franchisor just naturally made sense. My previous business kind of was a franchisor. I trained brokers how to be a franchise broker. They bought my lead. I had to keep
Yeah.
them happy. I had to get them to go the follow the process without can't make them because it's their own business. So I had to convince them in a way like a franchisor needs to with their franchisees. And so all
Mm,
of that was the natural progression. Franchise playbook. What happened was when I was talking with Zach and we were talking about building a franchise brand on our own, we both felt like we had done a lot, but not our own thing. We were successful, but not our own success. Kind of like Tom Brady had to go play for a different team to just see that it was his success, not the Patriots, right? So it's like, we wanted to do our own thing. We started looking at doing a brand. And the truth is what we learned was it's hard. It's easier to build a hard startup than it is to build the easier plan. What I mean by that is the harder startup, a lot of times, like the harder path is actually easier because the vast majority are going for the easy path. And so there's actually a lot less people on the terrain to the
mm,
harder path. And what we found was the brighter minds wanted to work for a platform.
mm,
The brighter people, the more intelligent, driven people, the quality people like our CMO, Christian Betancourt, for example, and Steve, our VP of development, they wanted to be part of 10 brands, not one.
mm.
And so really it just came down to with a bigger vision, a better team would be built. And so we had to come up with the franchise playbook, which was to have 10 brands all in home services. Zach's background's home services. My background when I was before my college days, I sold Kirby vacuums, door to door home service. We knew it was all about sales and marketing. And so what we're doing is we're building our first brand's Voda, but we have the shared services that we can deploy across our different brands. And our vision is to be the largest privately held platform in home services.
Hmm. No, that's awesome. I think that's really powerful. And, for someone that really doesn't know anything about Voda, I think, that's pretty good description. But do you want to dive into, what the specifics, how, if you're a franchise owner of a Voda, how are they deriving revenue? What does that actually look like? So anyone that knows absolutely nothing about Voda, what does Voda do for people?
Yeah, sure. So, well, we got into restoration. I'll start with the business side. If you
Sure.
want a business that's a need, not a want, meaning people have to solve the problem remember I said people are actively solving a problem, they have to scratch the itch, it's got to be fixed. When your basement floods, you got to fix it, right? So it's a need, not a want. It's a business where third party pays, meaning the insurance company pays, not the homeowner typically. It's an industry that's growing 5% year over year. It's a $300 billion industry, 210 commercial, 80 billion residential. And it's a fragmented industry. ServPro is a $3 billion company and a 1% of the market. So it's very fragmented. And then finally, it's a business where the labor pool is non-skilled labor. You can hire someone with a good attitude who's good with their hands. And it's a high average ticket where we're getting $3,000, let's say, on national average on a water job. It's very high profit margin. Our franchisees, they're not extracting water or cleaning carpets. We just hire business people that run the business. So what do we do? Voda is a cleaning and restoration franchise. So restoration has to do with anything from a fire, mold, water. Water is a big focus of ours. We're drying that home or that business, or we're cleaning out the odor from the smoke or the mold. We're restoring the property and making it good as new, whether it's B2B or B2C. And then in addition, we're the only franchise to do not only restoration, but we also do cleaning, floor cleaning, carpet, tile, and grout. And so we're really two franchise businesses in one interactive model.
No, that's awesome. And Dan, and I think it's really interesting. You know, there's a couple restoration franchises out there, but what you guys do that's very differentiated is you added that carpet and cleaning company as well. Can you kind of talk about the significance of adding in that second business and what actually went into finding that carpet cleaning business? I understand that there was some pretty heavy due diligence to find, the best business to kind of partner up with.
Yeah, I mean, when we learned everything about restoration, it screamed out to us that was the right space to be in, and everything was so positive. The only negative to restoration is the fact that if there isn't a water job or mold job, I can't stick a hose in your house and wet your house and then say you got to dry it, right? If it's dry, you don't need it to be dried. Yeah. So the need not want can kind of be a double-edged sword. And so we didn't like that. And although there's 14,000 water damage cases a day and a lot of different pipes and toilets and everything else, breaking, if there wasn't business, then there was no business to be had. And so what we loved about the Voda was the cleaning component. Not only does floor cleaning in a business or home get you in the door and build predictable revenue and cash flow, but it also gets you to be the number one thought they have when they're calling. Gets us the ability to build relationships. And so when we found that there really wasn't a franchisor doing that, we felt like we discovered, Uber or Fire. Like, how do we not combine those two models? And so our franchisees really do enjoy having the benefit of both the floor cleaning and the restoration. It's really one of our unique selling propositions as a franchise model.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And, probably just gives you the more sense of validation as more predictable income that's coming in. You can kind of see that monthly recurring revenue. And then the cherry on top is restorations, one of the biggest growing, fastest industries. And then you're able to capitalize on really the best of both worlds. So I think that's really, really powerful. And Dan, one of the things that you've been really great at is identifying a franchise's ideal candidate. And you and I have had some off-camera discussions about this, and I think it's very interesting, all the different franchises trying to find that ideal candidate. But what Voda does that's very specific is you guys know who your ideal candidate is. Even as an emerging brand, you're not trying to try things out. You know who you're looking for. You know who can really find massive success. How did you go about finding that ideal candidate, especially for an emerging brand where people may just be getting started? How do you figure out someone that's going to have success in your system?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're a home service business. What sport did you play as a kid growing up?
I played basketball and baseball.
Okay, let's use baseball. I played baseball as well. When I was growing up, the baseball jerseys had the name on the back, sponsored by a local business, and it was often a contracting business. And that owner of that contracting business knew everybody, right? He was the guy. He was a likable guy. I'm not saying he was a salesman, but he knew how to be in the teams and the PTAs. And he was the president of the HOA association when there was no president. He was self-elected, and everybody loved him, right? And so I call that person the mayor of the town. And so there is only one type of franchise owner for Voda. We reject anyone that isn't, which is the mayor of the town. I will say we knew that in our guts starting the business. And then after some franchise experience, we quickly realized we thought maybe there was another persona. There is no other persona. We only want the mayor of the town. So who's the mayor of the town? The mayor of the town is the guy or gal that loves to get out there and meet people. They love people. They love to interact. They're always moving and shaking. They are someone that can lead people and inspire people. The mayor doesn't necessarily do all the work, but they lead departments to get things done. And so they're a real action-oriented person. So when you think of a mayor, that's who you want in Voda. And
Hmm.
what we do, Josh, at Voda is we do four pillars of support to support the mayor so they can not be in the day-to-day. We do the lead gen, we have a call center. Pillar number 2, we do their hiring, help them with their hiring. We do bookkeeping, and we have training pillars. And so what we do, everything we can, is to keep that mayor running city council, not doing the janitorial services that their team can do.
No, that's awesome, Dan. That's really powerful and really hit the nail on the head with, the questions that everyone's looking for, lead generation, employees, and, a lot of people looking for, that kind of executive type model. Can you walk someone through, someone is interested in kind of that executive model? What kind of work is brought into, training, operations, bringing in that general manager? How do you find someone that's actually, trustworthy to kind of run and help grow that business, if that makes sense? So candidate, maybe, absentee is very thrown out there, but, that's kind of a side conversation, but focused in on that executive model, someone that isn't trying to actually do the work, but someone that's still trying to grow and scale a business. How do you find like a general manager that's, trustworthy, given it's very hard to find employees? How do you find someone that is worthy to be a GM, and how do you keep him retained, happy, and kind of incentivize him as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the definition of semi-absentee is, like you said, different for different people. To me, I like the term manage the manager. And so a
Hmm.
business where I'm managing a manager is what I want to be in. In Voda, I've got many managers and I manage them and work with them, and I'm outside of the day-to-day. That's to me what semi-absentee means. Can that lend itself to less time? Absolutely. But I think any business starts out needing some time. It's not an ATM machine. I always say if a franchise didn't need anything from you, they wouldn't franchise. They would open up corporate stores. There's a reason they're franchising. And don't be sold like a pipe dream idea. Go into a franchise with the realities. What we do at Voda to keep the business as managed the manager as possible is we do all the paid media, all their lead gen on Facebook, Google, pay-per-click, local service, direct mail, everything. Anything that has to do with pulling a lever to make the phone ring, we do.
Yeah.
We have a call center that answers the phones and books the jobs. So the sales and marketing bucket are kind of covered.
Hmm.
Now, again, we need a mayor of the town because nothing replaces the guy or gal that can go out there and build a relationship.
Yeah. Hmm.
As far as hiring, which is what I think you had asked, we have a program called Talent Scout where we actually are able to find the general managers for our franchise. It's of course their decision who they hire,
Hmm.
especially with joint employer and laws like that. But we're able to find opportunities for people to hire general managers.
Hmm.
And then we give them suggestions on how to structure what I call a vesting equity schedule for their general manager.
Okay.
And so what happens is our franchisees, they have general managers typically with restoration experience who are become like part owners who can have equity vest over multiple years where they can earn essentially to be a shareholder in the company.
Hmm. No, that's really cool and really provides a strong incentive, I would say, if you can acquire that ownership in the company over time. But I'd be curious, one of the things in franchising that's so powerful as an emerging brand, you're trying to grow, become, validated in these different markets. One of the things when someone gets into a franchise system is really the consistency across different locations. So if I, get Voda Restoration in Boston and Southern California, expecting that same level of customer service, how do you maintain the same standards as you're growing a business? You have an emerging brand, you want to, grow rapidly, award territories. How do you make sure that, franchise owner number one maintains those same standards as franchise owner potentially number 100 down the road, if that makes sense?
Absolutely. I think that there's a great saying, you build a franchise system for C players
Hmm.
and then you recruit A players. And what I mean by that is you make the system so simple that a C player, a high caliber person can succeed. And
Hmm.
then you only allow A players into that simplified system. And so for us, like we're constantly working on the system. One of my favorite sayings that our founder Dragon says is don't blame them, train them.
Hmm.
Don't blame them. When something goes wrong, don't blame them, train them. And
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in the saying, people don't fail, systems do. And
Hmm.
so every time we see something that is not going right, we look at the system first. I call it no walkie-talkie moments. So what do I mean by that? If you and I are working together and we have to go like, hey, did do this? How's that? Walkie-talkie, like we're in the line of battle and we're walkie-talking. That's not a business, right? If we're in battle, we have a plan. You know that you're going to go left and I'm going to go right, and we're going to duck under if we're in the military, right? And we're going to attack the enemy. It's not walkie-talkie. Walkie-talkie is only there when the plan doesn't work and goes sideways. Of course, you got to adjust for, these types of things. And so for us, it's about building systems that are so simplified, anyone can follow them. The GM can follow them, the technician, the owner. And then it's about bringing in A players who have a desire to hold themselves to the same level of standard that franchise owner number 1, 2, and 5. It's a great point though, because I was talking to a private equity firm recently, just, someone I know, and they were saying that, a lot of times franchisors do a great job bringing in the right franchisees for 1 through 15, and then they start to loosen up, and you got to stay disciplined, and you only bring in A players, or try to at least.
No, that's really powerful. And I think it's a good lesson for someone that is thinking about getting into franchising, and they're thinking about business ownership. They're maybe thinking about those next steps. As an emerging brand, you're getting started, you're becoming a more well-validated brand. You're speaking to a lot of candidates on the daily basis. Are there any like similar themes that you're hearing from candidates in terms of, similar concerns, fears? What are like the biggest kind of triggers that you hear when someone is going through the process? Biggest concerns in terms of business ownership, and how does franchising kind of get them over the hump, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I think I might have heard a guest of yours say something that I might say the same thing, which is, in my time doing this for so long, I can tell if someone's going to buy a franchise from the first call, almost always. And I can tell if they'll be a good franchise owner pretty early in too. There are patterns that just exist. Someone who challenges our process, they challenge everything. How we do anything is how we do everything. Someone who is inconsiderate of time, not a good franchise owner, almost every time. I can tell when a husband, wife get on and they're on Zoom and they're locked in, they're serious. And when they're not, they're not. And they do everything that way, by the way. It's not what lack of interest or not. They just, everything they do either disorganized or organized. The people that go through the process, this sounds a little salesy, but the people that go through the process, they get the information and they make a decision and they buy. Those are the people that make better franchise, and truthfully, because the people that get stuck in the decision process, they're going to be in the same way when they have to decide if they buy another truck or hire that person or quickly fire someone. And so we look for decisive people that can gather the information, make a decision. And that decision could be no, by the way, but They can either say I'm in or I'm out. And then they move on and they do that again and again and again. The people that get hung up in the details, like they're not typically franchise owners. And what's interesting, Josh, is someday I'll do a study. I plan to. The people that challenge our vendors, for example, right? Especially ones that have never been a franchise owner. I can almost guarantee someday if I took some type of survey system, my low performers are the ones that challenged the vendors too much. And my top performers are the ones that didn't. I think you added this. I think I have to move. I'll get out of here. Are you guys reserved here? Oh, sorry. We'll edit that.
No worries. Hey,
common office.
Hopefully unedited conversations. No worries. This is what it's made for on the Conquer the Mind podcast. No.
Good. All right. No edit. But anyway, so to finish my rant, I had my Celsius before this podcast, but they make the best franchise owners. And so, I've got a guy who does $9 million in another franchise. He's a $9 million producer. 9 million. President's Club, decided to join Voda instead of the restoration brand that platform has for many reasons. But I haven't heard that guy once. I don't think I've heard one thing from him challenging one thing. And I'm not saying everything we have is perfect, but what he looks at his franchise as is like the military. He may disagree with something and he may bring it to us at the proper time, and we'll take the advice or feedback. But while he's in the military, he does the things that he bought into, and those are the best franchise owners.
No, that's really powerful. And yeah, it was Jamie Levine of Resting Rainbow that brought up that point where within like the first 5-10 minutes of the call, she's like, all right, this person's serious or they're not serious. And yeah, I think a lot of times, especially around the holiday season, there's a lot of window shoppers, people that may have that New Year's resolution, maybe having a couple of drinks at a Christmas party, someone throws out business ownership, they, create a shopping cart of a bunch of different franchises. And, as your point, I think is really great that business owners are people that process information and they make a decision off that information, and they have the confidence in themselves to make that decision. A lot of times you'll see people asking their friends, a bunch of people that aren't in franchising, they just don't have that industry experience. Maybe someone owns a mom and pop business and then they're comparing that to a franchise business model, and it's comparing apples to oranges. It's just very different from that perspective. But for a candidate that is going through the process, they are someone that is generally considering business ownership. Is there like a checklist that you think a candidate like comes up with in terms of finding, when they're going through the decision-making process, what would make a good franchise system and how that aligns with them? Are there, one or two like big things that someone should be looking for in terms of being like, all right, this is a good franchise system that's going to continue to validate, they're going to continue to award, versus, this is someone just really kind of looking to sell me something, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Can I give you the 10? I have a list.
Yeah, let's go for it. I'd love it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what makes Jamie great is she's transparent and candid. I feel like she's not going to sell someone a franchise just to do it. And that's what makes her great. She says whatever she feels, which is her strength, one of her strengths. And I've known her for a while. But what I would tell you would be, that, do you have this reserved? No. Okay. Sorry. Sorry. It's an active day here at the business center, but,
No worries, I love it.
I kind of commandeered this space. I took it over. So there's three things in a franchise. There's brand, systems, and people. Brand meaning the brand stands out, could turn heads. Doesn't mean everyone knows it. No one knew McDonald's when they first launched, but those golden arches turned your head and got you to say, what the heck's that? And go to the drive-thru. Then the systems were really good. That gave you a great product at McDonald's. And that was because, as much of he may have been a jerk portrayed in that movie, the founder, Ray Kroc, was a great recruiter of great people with Fred Turner and all his team. And so it's brand, systems, and people. And I would argue people come before systems. And then you want to look at, there's 5 things to think about with a franchise. Number one is, how are you going to predictably get customers, and how's the franchisor going to help me? If the franchisor is not helping you get customers, don't buy the franchise. Number two, if they're not doing anything to help, you got to think about how am I going to get employees, and how's the franchisor going to help me? Yeah. Number three, there's already XYZ business in the market. How does this business stand out? It has to have a unique selling proposition that cuts through the noise to the consumer. Obviously, 4, the numbers have to make sense for you. 5, the day in the life. I remember my mistake when I joined Murphy was I heard a guy was doing $1 million a year down in Florida, and I thought I could do $1 million a year. My mistake was not understanding that that guy had 2 things different than me. 1, the Florida market is entirely different than New Jersey. 2, he was 50 years old with a book of business. I was 22. I was stupid. Like, I wasn't thinking about why was that successful franchise owner successful, or if someone's not successful, do I have some skills that they don't have if I'm validating? Which brings me to, you need to go through validation. Like, I'm not saying every franchise owner should say this is the best thing since sliced bread. I think you'll have kind of different high, middle, and low performers, but you should hear an underlying theme of, if you were to do this again, would you do it? Like, would you buy the franchise again? And the answer be yes. And then the last thing I'll say is, it's got to be a brand that's growing, not too quickly, but a brand that's growing. And quite frankly, you really have to believe in the leadership team. That's who really you're buying, is a bunch of people that are helping you.
Yeah, those are all great points. And I think that would be a totally separate podcast discussion to break down each one of those points. But I think that's a ton of value. So if anyone's thinking about franchising, I would definitely rewind that clip. So Dan, I'm very conscious of your time at this moment. One final question, if you have time.
Sure.
So, a lot of people, they come into franchising, they're saying, I'm making this big investment, potentially my life's going to change. And they're saying, what is franchising going to give me? What am I going to get out of franchising? I'm making this huge investment. Sometimes, a lot of, someone's worked 40, 50, 60 years to accumulate this wealth, and they're making this huge investment. They're not necessarily sure what they're getting into. You can manage expectations, but once you make that investment, things may change from day one, and then, you'll have franchise business coaches to help you out. But for someone thinking about franchising, what is the opportunity set in franchising? You've been in franchising for a decade plus now. You spoke about your mission, which is very powerful in terms of helping people become business owners. Why is that so important to help people through franchising become a business owner?
Well, you said it yourself. This podcast is about mindset. Franchising provides you with brand systems and people. Those people are there to hold you accountable. My success coaches at Voda help people come up with a vision
Mm,
and then help them fit into that vision. When you go on your own and you get lost, you have to go to YouTube and you don't have community, and it's lonely at the top as a business owner. So I think franchising
mm,
provides community, if anything. It should also provide brand systems and people, but I think the community can help everybody do better as a franchisee.
mm. No, that's awesome, Dan. This has been a really great hour. I appreciate your time. I know you got to probably head off now. I usually give a brief summary of the podcast. I don't know if you have a few seconds, but if you need to go, feel free to head off and I can just give a brief summary for the viewers that are still tapped in.
I do have to jump off to get on my upstairs, but it was great meeting, or not meeting you, great seeing you, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, Dan, I appreciate your time on the episode today. And I'll drop anyone that's looking to connect with Dan, his information will be in the bio as well. But that was an awesome episode. Dan, if you guys don't know, I would look up Dan Claps. He's, really an industry veteran. And even at such a young age, he's accomplished an incredible amount, real serial entrepreneur. So, if you've made it to the end of the podcast, make sure to like, share, comment, subscribe. If you found any value out of this, I'd love to help other people learn about the world of franchising. And I always say franchising may or may not be for you, but at least allow me to help you make an educated decision about your future, your family's future, and really see if franchising may or may not be right for you. But from my perspective, really my big takeaways today were he brought up a great point. Just listen to people, also starting before you're ready. Sometimes you may not get every single answer when you're getting started, but it doesn't necessarily matter. You process information, you make a decision, and it really starts for me thinking about your big picture, that why. Where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years? I think it's hard to picture 10 years down the road. Who knows with AI technology, the world's always going to change, but where do you picture yourself in the next 3 to 5 years? And your current position, franchising, how is that potentially going to get you where you want to be? And I think Dan's point, if you're someone you're thinking about more work, you're doing more than what's asked about you, you work on the weekends, that's a really good sign that you're meant for something greater. So maybe business ownership may be right for you. And the good thing about franchise is that you don't need to spend hours going through YouTube, searching your local market to figure this out. Someone like myself is here 24/7 to help you make that educated decision to see if franchising may or may not be right for you. And great point that he also brought up is being able to manage time. That is key. Everyone has the same 24 hours, 7 days a week, but if you can find ways to be more conscious about your day and attacking each day, I think it will really pay strong dividends in the end. And if you can influence people, your sales, you like talking to people, there's going to be a lot of different ways that those skills can definitely convert into being a business owner. So, one final point that he brought up in terms of success, success is not always defined by, where you are right now. It can be business, lifestyle, family, and trying to have this lifestyle of combining a bunch of different elements and really giving back to other people as well. So Dan's mission is very powerful in terms of helping other people become business owners. It really relates strongly to my why of helping people through financial freedom, the lifestyle freedom, and having that impact on other people. And in my opinion, I don't think there's a better way to do that outside of franchising in terms of achieving that sense of freedom and having that impact on your local community and making that difference. So I appreciate everyone for tuning in to episode 22 of the Conquer the Mind podcast. Dan, I had an awesome time with Dan today and looking forward to a great year in 2024. So everyone, like I said, like, share, comment, subscribe, help out the algorithm. Have an awesome day, everyone.